In this video, we're going to learn how to make a custom HTML document using Fusion 360 share links. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video, I thought we'd take a little bit of a different look at the share links in Fusion 360 and talk about some of the cool things that we can maybe do with these. So in the description of the video, there is a link to this Camaro assembly. And this is the same one that we used in our rendering videos. And what I want to do is I want to talk about a couple of different things. So we're inside of the render gallery right now, and I want to talk about one, the turntable. So the turntable render is something that you have to use cloud credits for, but you can download as an HTML viewer. And I want to talk about this, and I'm actually going to draw some similarities and some differences between the way in which we can get an HTML turntable out of Solidworks Visualize and how that looks different on the code perspective. But the main thing that I want to talk about is going to be share links and some of the cool things that we can do with share links. So first, when you're inside of Fusion 360, you can go to the File menu and select Public Link. Now this is the way that I put share links in the download section of or the documents that you guys get from the video, the description. So I just simply copy this link and I put that public link directly inside of the description for you guys. So you can open them up, you can view them in 3D on the web, and you can download them. So pretty straightforward. However, if we either go to the version description in the data panel and view details on web, or if we go to the file menu and we take a look at viewing these details on the web, what that's actually going to do is it's going to bring this up inside of a web browser. So when we do that inside of a web browser, something a little bit different happens. So let's take a look at what happens when we're inside of the browser. Now, from here, there are a couple different ways that we can share the same document. So from this overview page, we can use the share option. From the view page, we have the same thing. We've got the share option. And notice that in here, we can rotate it around. We can manipulate some settings. So for example, we can go to environment and we can go into like say boardwalk or field or snowfield or plaza. Now, this is going to help us change the visual properties. Now, this is the same scene that we would use to render the car, but obviously it's blurred out. It's a little bit different. But this allows us to rotate things around and take a look at it with different reflections and lighting and so on. So again, inside of here, we can go to share and we kind of get the same thing. Or we can go back a step and we can take a look at this inside of the viewer here. And from here, you'll notice that we also have that same share option. So all three places will go to the same exact thing. Now, the main difference here is this first section, copy link, looks just like it does in Fusion 360. So we can add a password to protect it. We can determine whether or not people can download it. But then we also have this email option and we have this embedded option. And this is the one that I'm going to talk about, embedded. So you'll notice here that we've got this iframe. And before we copy that, I'm going to go into a new blank Word document and I'm going to copy the share link. Now, this is the same one that is in the description of the video, but this share link is going to be important, and we're going to see why in just a second. So when we talk about the embedded option, we get what's called an iframe. Now, in this video, you don't have to know anything about HTML programming. Now, myself, I am not an HTML programmer. I've tried to play around with it a little bit, but it's just sort of not even on my radar for something that I want to learn. But what's important here is that the iframe gives us the ability to create a frame in an HTML document where we can use the same visualization, the same view properties that we have directly inside of here on the web in Fusion 360 Teams. So a couple different things you'll note is that we've got some size options. And when we change these, the only thing that is really changing is this embedded width and height. Now you notice it goes 640 480, 800 600, and 1024 by 768. Those are the three sizes that we can deal with. We're going to do 640 by 480. It doesn't really matter at this point. It'll give you a good understanding of what this means. So we're going to copy that. and we're going to put that in our Word document as well. So the trick to making this work is we have to understand the difference between what this is doing and what this is doing. Now, the iframe is actually just going to give us our viewer. So when we take a look at this and we select view, the iframe will give us everything we see here. It'll give us the option to measure, to change the background properties, to expand the design and pick out aspects of the design. If there are different bodies that we want to focus on, we can do that. And it's gonna allow us to do that directly in this HTML document. The other option, that A360 link, that download link, that we're going to trick the system a little bit. We're going to replace this this identification to the public share, this embedded iframe. We're going to replace everything inside of the quotes inside of there up to the question mark, which is right here. We're going to replace that with this information, and that's going to allow us to trick the system a little bit and actually put in a download link. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter some random characters in here. It doesn't really matter. And then what we're going to see is that when we go to File and Save As, what we want to do is we want to create, in this case, what we want to do is we want to create an HTML document. And I already have a location where I'm going to save that. And I simply want to change the document type to be HTML. Now there's a couple different ones that we can do here: single file web page, and then web page filtered. We want to choose the first web page.html. We're going to save that. We have to enter the file name. So I'm going to put custom iframe doc. So now that we've saved this, the next part of this trick is to reopen this document. I'm going to leave this Word document up. I don't really need it, but I'm going to just drag it off to the other screen. And then I'm going to go into my Notepad. Now, obviously, I'm working in Windows. I'm going to go into Notepad. This can be done in Visual Studio Code. It can probably even be done in Word or other Word text editing documents, but I find it's just easier to use Notepad, and we'll get a good understanding of what we're looking at here. So I'm going to open this document. We need to find where it is. So in my case, I have it saved in here, and we need to change the file type. In this case, we need to make sure that the file type is all files. So this is that custom iframe doc. And one thing you'll notice is that it actually created a subfolder as well. So one thing that happens when you save a Word document as an HTML, a lot of other stuff has to go with it. So if you double click in here, you can see that there's the color scheme, the file list, and the metadata. Again, not really important to what we're doing. We're just going to open this HTML document with our Notepad. And inside of here, you'll notice that a lot of stuff was created. And again, you don't have to know anything about HTML coding. We're going to walk through the entire process. But when we get all the way to the bottom, you'll notice that inside of here, in this sort of P class MSO normal, P class MSO normal, then we have this other stuff that we created, this iframe, the random text that I sort of wrote in here, and all this other stuff that's sort of happening. Now, all of that stuff that's in there, you know, the ASDF, this is all the stuff that I type. Anytime we see this P class equals MSO normal, this was just text that was in that document. So text that we entered, that's going to be displayed whenever we reopen this as an HTML. But what I really want to do is I want to pull out some of that text. So in here where we've got that ASDF in between these arrows, I'm going to just put some different text so we can see that this works. New HTML doc. Okay, this other line here that I just typed in the random text, we're just going to delete it, get rid of it completely. And then this other stuff that, that happened in here. If we leave any of it here, it's just going to be text in an HTML document. It's not going to do anything. So what we actually need to do is we need to put it up inside of the body of the HTML document. So before anything happens in here, so we've got this body, language, break word, I'm going to stick it right after it before this div class. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to my Word document, and I'm just going to recopy this iframe. So if we scroll back to the left, it's just the iframe text we copied directly from our share link from, in this case, from Teams when we were online. I'm going to repeat that process. I'm going to just paste it again, but this time I'm going to take that A360 link, that HTTP A360 link, all the way until the end of that link. Again, it's between those two arrows. If you want, you can go back to that original Word document. Again, I've got it on my other screen. And what I want to do is I want to replace everything before the question mark. So HTTPS, I'm going to just replace that with the A360 link. So remember, we're still in an HTML document. Let's save this and let's see if this works. So again, it wants to save it. I'm just going to say all files. It's going to be saved as an HTML document. I'm going to replace it. Yes, that's fine. It says that it's being used in another process, and that's because the original document was still open. So let's go ahead and just try to save it one more time, and let's close this out. Now, if I open that custom iframe document, so it's an HTML. If I get out of full screen mode, you can see that here's the original right here, and here is the new custom iframe document. So inside of this document, again, we left this text, this new HTML doc was that text that we replaced, and this was the original stuff that was inside of that Word document. So everything that was down there in the bottom of that HTML document when we viewed it as text, it's all still there. However, everything before it was building out the rest of this website, right? So you can see here that we can rotate the car on the left. Again, we can change the scene settings. We can adjust the appearances. Let's go ahead and put it in a field. And you can see here that we are able to do all the same stuff that we are able to do when viewing this on the web. So exactly what would happen is if you sent somebody this A360 link, they'd be able to view this on the web. The one on the right, however, where we replaced it with that A360 link, now we have the download option. You can see here that we can pick an FBX file if we want to send it to Blender or an STL. We can download it as a Fusion 360 archive file, or we even have this open in Fusion 360. So if you have Fusion installed on your machine, you can click this and it'll open the Fusion archive file directly in Fusion 360. So that is the main difference between the one on the left and the one on the right. You can see open in Fusion is still on this one, but that download option doesn't come through if you use the embedded iframe. But you can see that these are very similar. We still have all the same settings. I can change the environment. Again, I think I used field. You can see that it looks the same. There's not really any difference here. The iframe size, that 640 by 480, is what's controlling the overall size of this window. You can see they're both the same size. This one has that extra border at the top. This one doesn't, but all the tools are the same. The open in Fusion is the same. The little view cube thing where we can interrogate certain aspects of the design, that's all the same. So now the question is, why would we do this? What is the reason that we would want to do this? Well, this right now is an HTML document that is local to my machine or your machine if you're following along and building this on your own. Being local to your machine means that this is an HTML document, really the entire folder, because again, we do have those additional metadata files, the 3 other files that go with it, that you can zip up and send to somebody. And the cool thing about this is you can put additional information in here. So we can share the detailed drawing. So if we had a 2D detailed drawing in Fusion, we could create a share link for that, put it in here. We could have the design, the assembly, each individual part. We could have the drawing. We could also allow them to download the drawing as a PDF. They can use the measure tool to figure out different sizes of different things in the design. And it's just a kind of a cool feature to allow them to do all in one place, to see each one of the individual parts of an assembly. And because it's also a Word document, we could include things like a bill of materials. We could have notes about the design if we're trying to look at different concepts. If there was CAM data or simulation data, we would be able to see it right here. Instead of just this cube here, we would see the simulation one and the CAM one for manufacturing. So it's a great way to share out all of that data because one of the downsides to sending somebody just a single link is if there is additional designs that go along with that. If there are, let's say it's a generative design, you won't get the original assembly with that generative design unless you put them back together as a distributed design. So sharing it this way can be kind of helpful. If you have your own website and you have backend access to the file storage system, the FTP, then you can upload the HTML document as well as the folder, the subfolder with all of the doc files, the metadata and the scheme and all that stuff. And you can host this on your own website as a web page. So again, that's kind of another cool aspect of it is you can do that directly on your own website. You can sort of put these things to share your designs. And instead of just having a static image or render, you can let people rotate them around. If you just use the embedded iframe, you don't have to worry about the download link option. If you use the A360 link and replace the iframe data with it, then you can have them download it directly from here. So now that we've seen this, let's take a little bit of a look at the way that we could do this in SolidWorks. Now, I do want to note that the SolidWorks option is obviously it's a bit more expensive. If you have SolidWorks, then obviously you've paid several $1,000s for it. If you then add on SolidWorks Visualize, which is a rebranded bunk speed, it was a direct competitor for Keyshot, then you get some additional kind of functionality. So one thing that's cool about this is there's a lot of control over the way in which this can work because you're rendering out a certain number of images. You can have them pan up and pan down. So in this case, this is a 360-degree render of a project I did, probably 8 or 9 years ago. It was for a reseller project that I did for a hubsteer bike. And this is 360 rendered images, which means that I have a rendered image every 1 degree, which means that the motion is extremely smooth. And we get that smooth motion when we're looking at the iframe data directly in the Fusion 360 links. But if we've taken a look at doing the turntable render in Fusion 360, so if we export that as an HTML, the highest resolution that we have is 36 frames. So we have 6 frames or 36 frames, which means that this is going to jump 10 degrees every time we move the cursor. Now, we do still have HTML file here. We could theoretically host this on a website, but there are some major differences that happen between the two. Now, the major differences that happen between the HTML version that you get from SolidWorks Visualize, and I assume from other rendering programs, is the fact that it's actually JavaScript that's happening. There's an HTML file, and then JavaScript is referencing it. And if we take a look at that, so here is the HTML document for the turntable render from Fusion 360. So you can see all the code on the right-hand side. This is where my cursor is. There is quite a bit of code that happens here. And the reason that this happens is because unlike the way that SolidWorks Visualize does it, and again, it's rebranded bunk speed, there is not a library, there's not a data set of all of the rendered images. So it's still rendered on the cloud and it's hosted on the cloud. So it's looking at, you can see here that it's pointing to a specific URL in this case, and there's not much information. There's nothing locally that happens. When we're looking at the code that happens with SolidWorks Visualize, it's using some additional technology that they've sort of latched onto. So what's happening here is there's an open HTML document that is pointing directly to an index HTML document, and it's pointing to this folder structure called data. Now, when we think about this, what this means is if we are trying to host this on our website, then we need to maintain the folder structure and the location of these files. So we can still have this HTML document, but we need to make sure that the folder structure stays consistent. Now, if we take a look at that index, the index is then pointing to a bunch of different HTML files. So you can see that It's taking a look at the content in Prototype.js, Scriptalicious, Browser Detect. So it is able to work very well in things like Firefox and Chrome and so on. And then you can see that there's this Apple Core JS, VR, Library 360, and so on. So from here, the vr.js, the VR JavaScript file, this is where most of the magic behind the scenes happens. So we have different options, things that we can do, like we can have it rotate before it stops, which means that it can spin around a couple times and then it can slowly rotate to a predefined position. And that predefined position is based on the render position or the image position and the complete rotation. So then as we go down, you can see that we have control over this. You can see here that image index offset. So for example, if we're rendering a motorcycle or a car and we want it to end at that 3/4 angle, then it doesn't mean that our render had to start there. We just need to pick the image position for that to work. And you'll notice that it's a matrix value. It's got two different values, and I'll explain that in just a second. So again, infinite axis, autoplay, false, frames per second, the speed of it spinning right away, and so on. So we can control all of this stuff. And then sort of the neat thing that happens from here is this references that 360JS. Now, the 360JS is really talking about, it's making the rotation happen. And inside of here, it's taking a look, it's looking very specifically for images called frame, and then they've got numbers and they're JPEGs. Now here's what's cool about this is you can take this data and you can swap out those rendered images for other rendered images. So for example, when I've done this for clients, there might be a position somewhere in the middle of the renders where you want to add a call out or text or something to a certain group of images. Maybe you want to highlight them. That means that you can pull those images out, you can adjust them with whatever photo editing program you want to use, and you can put them directly back in, and the rotation and the renders will all still work. So you'll notice that here, 360, again, 360 rendered images for us to go all the way around with high resolution. And then there's a number 1. Now, the way that this works is that 1 is the vertical position. So with this functionality, it actually lets you rotate and tilt up and down. When we look at the 360.js, you'll notice that this one is for Pagani Zonda that I drew. And this one says 180, which means I did a render every 2 degrees around the object. But then you'll notice that this number here is 10. I allowed it to rotate up a difference of 10 degrees. So this means it does 180 around the object, and then it goes up 1 degree and it rotates another 180, another 180 renders. And eventually we have 1800 images in this version. And if we take a look at this, I'll just show you the image folder here. I can rotate, I can kind of go through and scroll really fast through the folder, and you can kind of see that the car is rotating in these images, and they're going up 1 degree each time. So when you do this in SolidWorks and SolidWorks Visualize, you have control over the angle that happens each time. But you'll notice that when we get to the end, we're looking more at the top of the car, and at the beginning, we're looking more at the front of the car. So let me go ahead and I'll just open this one up for you. Let's go ahead and just open this and see if it works. It'll depend on if all of the documents are downloaded. Because I use OneDrive and SharePoint, a lot of this stuff is offloaded to the cloud. And that doesn't work with these documents. They all have to be preloaded and saved. So it does take a little bit of time for that to load. I'll see if it'll load and then we'll take a look at that. But the main takeaway, oh, here you can see it loaded while I was talking. So the main takeaway is here, you can see that it's rotating around. I have it stop at a certain position. Then I can manually grab it and rotate it left and right. And I can also view it vertically. All right, so when we do this vertically, it's a little bit trickier with this design, but we are able to rotate up and down. It's not working unless I completely scale it. There we go. So now we can rotate up and down. You can see some of the images are still downloading, so it's a little shaky. Let's just let those finish downloading. And let's talk once more, just really quick, about some of the things that we can do and some of the differences between sort of what we've been playing around with. So the main takeaway is that we are able to create HTML documents. These are custom HTML documents that we can use with the Fusion 360 data. And again, the main reason that I would do this is if I wanted to highlight different aspects of an assembly, maybe share a detailed drawing, some text information, bill of materials potentially, or supplier data, or maybe just like a simulation result. Maybe I want to talk about the simulation results or the setup. You can include all that data as text in that HTML document, as well as include either the A360 link or the integrated or embedded iframe data. It does vary, and I wanted to show you the SOLIDWORKS data just because I wanted to make sure that we understood that there were other options on the market, so you can understand potentially if you're trying to do this and you're trying to share designs on your website, kind of what the difference is. To get this sort of interaction, to do these renders, again, this one was 1800 renders. Now, this was a fairly small size, which is why it's grainy, because it was really intended to be, probably about this size, so it's a little bit higher resolution. It gets kind of crazy when the scale of the window isn't right. But you can see even here the quality isn't that great, whereas the quality with the higher, I did a higher resolution render on this one, the quality was a little bit better. And then with the Fusion 360 browser, the turntable, this was pretty good. And then our custom iframe document, this is excellent. This moves around really quickly. We can rotate it to any angle. We can use the view cube. We can measure. We got the home position, and we can interrogate the design. So this gives us a lot more functionality than doing those sort of fixed iframe renders. But again, we cannot turn this stuff off. So at least I don't know if there's a way to do it. We might be able to turn off some of these true false options here. So we could potentially play around with that and see what can happen. But we will always have some of these sort of other options on. So I think this is a pretty cool thing that you can play around with. You can figure out if there's some great functionality that you can do with these HTML documents and these iframe documents. Again, in order to actually get them on your website, you need to have backend access to the file storage structure, and you need to be able to maintain the folder structure that you get, whether it's using the SOLIDWORKS Visualize stuff or if it's using this custom HTML that we created using the Fusion 360 data. If you have any questions on any of this, please let me know. The intent was really not to highlight the SOLIDWORKS Visualize data, but I did want to show the difference between kind of what you can do with some other options that are on the market. So you can kind of understand the differences between a turntable HTML render or this custom option that we can do with the Fusion 360 embedded iframes. And then the SOLIDWORKS Visualize content that, again, there are limitations to all of this. None of it's perfect, but you can kind of see the differences here. In the Fusion 360 stuff, we can measure and interrogate and take a look at different properties of the design and so on. So use that as you may. Ask questions if you're trying to incorporate this or you have any ideas that you might potentially need some help with. Please let me know. I'm not an HTML programmer, so I can only do so much, but I'm happy to try to help you troubleshoot and figure out whatever we can do to make this kind of functionality work. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.